Well, good afternoon and welcome to our virtual luncheon, again with Fresno County and City Republican Women Federated. We want to welcome our members, our associate members, and our guests who are tuning in with us this afternoon. We want to welcome Lisa Smittcamp, our Fresno County District Attorney, who is gracious enough to give us some of her time today to share about lots of things that are going on locally, across the country, and how it impacts us here in Fresno County. She has been a very busy lady, so we are extra appreciative that she gave us this time today. So we're going to dive right into it. We've got a lot to cover, and Lisa, again, we want to thank you so much for being willing to participate in this with us. We originally had you scheduled to come to a luncheon and speak, and we're sorry we missed out on that, but we're glad we can at least connect with you this way and get a sense of what things have been like at the District Attorney's Office in the last crazy 6 months, and even more specifically in the last few weeks things have really kind of started some wheels turning. You've had a little bit of media attention, and so would you just kind of start off by giving us maybe just a little bit of background that came about, I believe it was last week, which is now a week and a half or so ago, when you said you were not going to be pursuing prosecution of Fresno County businesses that were open in defiance of COVID orders.
Right. So yeah, we received 4 cases in from the Alcoholic Beverage Control, which is a state agency who cited restaurants here locally for violating the orders that had been set down by the governor. And the criminal charge that they submitted the cases on is a kind of a broad business and professions code, which refers to pandemics or other emergency orders. And so the first thing, there's many factors that we take into consideration when we evaluate cases like this. And the first and most important thing is, can we prove this crime? And is it a crime? There's a lot of things that go into that. There's elements of the crime, whether it's general or specific intent. Who is the proper named defendant? Because when you have a business, it's very difficult sometimes to determine who is the defendant. Sometimes there are owners of restaurants that have investors, and there are bar managers, and there are restaurant managers, and so that's really a difficulty too with crime. But I think in the overriding issue for me is that as district attorney, I have discretion to file or not file cases in the interest of justice, right? It's very similar to a police officer who pulls you over for potential speeding. That officer has the ability to determine whether or not, after speaking with someone, whether to give a citation or a warning. And so when we looked at these cases and the totality of everything that's been going on with COVID and the ever-changing rules that seem to change, as the wind blows, and that's not really a slam on anybody. The virus is changing and the research is changing. So I think it's very difficult. We're all under such stress because of the shutdowns, and I think just looking at the collateral damage that the pandemic has caused, it really just did not sit well with me to make these activities criminal, right? And the thing I think that people really need to realize is there are other levels of administrative and licensing remedies that can be taken if that behavior is egregious, right? We all have to be respectful to the virus. We all have to understand that we have to, take the proper precautions to do what we can to keep ourselves safe. But making criminals out of these people in the culture that we live in and based on these facts and these circumstances is not going to happen in Fresno County as long as I'm the district attorney.
And I know that people are really appreciative of that discretion that you said that you've shown. I know we've seen it from Sheriff Mims and from the city of Clovis, and some other areas have kind of seen it that way and really looked to see beyond just the emergency orders and the serious health concerns that there are, but look to what's going on with the people and the communities as well and trying to meet those needs. So I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think the thing is I think that what the leadership in Sacramento is failing to focus on is the collateral damage of the orders. That's the issue. Yes, the virus is serious, and yes, we have to do everything that we can to prevent it. But unless you're living under a rock, that social distancing, wearing a mask, all these things, hand washing, the COVID doesn't like water, as we've heard, wash your hands. These are the things that we can do, but we're dealing with human beings,
right?
And people have big opinions. Some, are contrary to that sort of way of thinking. But I think we're also in a situation where people also have rights on the other side. You know, this is the United States of America, and we have civil liberties, and we have the ability to make our own choices, and our forefathers and our veterans have fought for those rights. And so if people don't want to go out to a restaurant because they have a fear of COVID, they don't have to.
Right.
Right? And you have a choice every day in who you socialize with. You have a choice every day who you come around within your family, right? And so I think the overreaching politics, if you will, of some of these rules that have been set down by Governor Newsom are just overbearing. And you know, we're the last state in the union to open up hair salons.
Yeah.
And we still don't have our nail salons open.
Right.
And the
Tell me about it.
you know, the hypocrisy of that, I think, is so telling of so many other collateral issues again, that the hairstylists and the nail people, as part of their licensing, hygiene is in the forefront, and it's required to get their license, to pass their state boards, and to literally hamstring these people into having no income has made people desperate. And I think we all know people that are doing hair in their garages. They're doing hair outside, you know, their salons in the heat and now in the smoke, and they're subjecting people to other types of health risks that are equal or just as bad as the COVID risks, whereas if they were allowed to be, you know, in their regular stations, they might not be exposing people to that. So I think that sometimes common sense goes out the door, and it's replaced with political motivations or whatever. And so, you know, this is just something small. I think that we can say for Fresno here, we're not going to allow this activity to be criminal.
And I think that one of the biggest frustrations, at least for me personally, when you look at how the sectors of the economy have been treated differently, you look at something like restaurants, or as you mentioned, hair and nail salons, where there's state oversight, you know, whether it's ABC or the state licensing boards, and it almost, at least to me, felt like Newsom and whoever else were looking at, well, what can we have say over? Where do we really maintain more control? And really trying to lock those areas down where, you know, if you're just a retail store that maybe doesn't have that type of thing, you just rely on more local permitting and that type of thing, they didn't really have the clause that they could get into them.
Right.
And I think that left it feeling kind of arbitrary, where, you know, if you can be in a Costco and jam-packed in there with everybody else because the box stores are open, but I'm not supposed to go to, you know, my local boutique where I know the owner and I've been shopping there for 20 years, and there's like maybe 4 people in the store at a time and what have you. It left it feeling very arbitrary, and I think that generated a lot of the frustration initially.
Yeah, and I think that's why people have said, okay, enough is enough. We started this all in March, and we didn't really understand COVID. We didn't know how to avoid it. We didn't know how it was going to spread. And now this is just going on for too long. You know, we're 6 months into this thing, and yes, it's, you know, it's real and it's here. But it doesn't have to be a death sentence for everybody. And I'm not trying to mitigate people who've lost their lives. Tomorrow I'm going to be attending the funeral of the deputy that was lost at the Fresno Sheriff's Department. I mean, it's heartbreaking. And I've had COVID, you know, in my family. There's people in my family that have had COVID, and it's not fun. Right. It's a scary thing. However, we have to consider the collateral damage again of shutting down the economy, shutting down the schools. The incidents of suicide are up. The suicide attempts are up. The alcohol consumption is up. Violence in the streets. Fresno PD is reporting up to 70 to 80% increase in violent crime. You know, child abuse is going unreported. The teachers are stressed.
Right.
You know, we're an essential service, so we haven't shut down for one day. And such an integral part of this office is our support staff, most of whom are parents or mothers. We probably have about 95% of our support staff is our moms. And you know, we know as Republican women, and we know as women in general, I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican or independent, you know, the mom is the heartbeat of the family. And for children who are fortunate, you know, to live in a 2-parent home, oftentimes the mom is the sort of the one who's doing the nutrition and the education and all that, and so it's a burden for a lot of people. And again, you know, the children are having a hard time. My kids are honor students, and they're both having a hard time staying engaged, staying on top of their work, because it's just affecting everybody. So I think we need to be smart about how to protect ourselves, but it's time for us to get down to back to real life.
It does seem too, particularly where the schools are concerned, there is a little less partisanship, because I have some Democrat mom friends who are like, this distance learning isn't working. You can't have multiple children, 3-4 children, who are trying to do Zoom lessons at the same time, but they're all in different grade levels, in different classes. And so, I mean, how do you organize a household to essentially have 4 different sets of classrooms operating? It just doesn't work. And that's a real issue. And like you say, for those families where they are essential workers, who's going to be there to take care of the kids who are distance learning from home? We need, and one of the most frustrating things to me was, like, on the heels of the schools can't be in person, there came out flyers with government subsidized daycare for kids. Bring your computers, we'll do distance learning from this now subsidized daycare, and we'll have people there that'll help you with your studies. It's like, that couldn't have been done in a classroom under those conditions. So again, there's so much about it that is obvious why there'd be frustration from people. And one thing you mentioned there was the suicide and concerns for child abuse and things like that, where schools are often the reporting agencies for finding those things and checking into them. And just thinking in general, kind of segueing to just the work you've done with human trafficking and child exploitation and those kinds of things. Most recently, I can think of 2 major things that have come down. One from our state legislature being SB 145. And then also there's been a lot of talk recently with the Netflix movie Cuties. And I see some correlation there. How do those 2 things impact your work and kind of weave themselves through all what's going on?
So there's so much going on in Sacramento that's detrimental to public safety. We could talk for hours and hours and hours about it. The way we pick juries, who's eligible to vote. Now they're going to have 17-year-olds voting. So with specific attention to SB 145, there has been a push in the legislature for many years to reduce the type of crimes and then the type of person who has to register as a sex offender. So when we first started off with sex offender registration back in the day, many crimes were life registration. And as time has evolved, those are the times of 3 strikes, and when we were a very pro law enforcement society. As 3 strikes has been diminished, so has sex registration, and it's become this thing that it is just this horrible, black mark to put on somebody. And anybody who knows anything about people who have sexual relations with a minor realize that pedophilia is actually in the DSM. It is an illness. It is a disorder. It is a disease, and it's not curable on very many occasions. Right? So this is why sex offender registration is such a necessary part of law enforcement, is because people can, look at it. And unfortunately, it's one of those things that with all the cuts to budgets and all the cuts to law enforcement agencies, it's one of the things that has really sort of, I don't want to say fallen by the wayside, but it's become a lower priority, because there are so many criminals now that are being released from prison, and the jail overcrowding is rampant ever since Prop 47 and AB 109 and the dumping really of all of these prisoners onto the local communities, that sex offender registration management has become a lower priority. And we can't pay the law enforcement agencies, the local ones are the ones who manage it, and it's difficult for them to manage it. So the fact now that they are reducing again the types of crimes, the age difference, it has to be over 10 years now for these certain types of crimes to require registration, is atrocious. I mean, it is absolutely atrocious, and it's one of 15 things that has been passed in the last 3 or 4 years that is detrimental to public safety. It's detrimental to good morals and values. It's detrimental to a functioning, healthy society, whereas adults and as law enforcement officials, as teachers, as police officers, as prosecutors, as nurses and doctors, that we are failing to protect our children. And it is, people that are been in the business for, I'm in 23, 24 years now. People have been in for 30 and 40 years say, stick around, kid. It's going to swing back. The pendulum has to swing back. And I've been waiting since 2014, and it keeps swinging to the left, and it keeps swinging to the left. And it's getting to the point now where we're really at a crisis mode. And the good people of California, the good people of Fresno have to start to be more vocal.
Yeah.
We have to stop being the silent majority. We have to stop being fearful, because, I drive around my neighborhood and I see all kinds of Biden and Harris signs, and I don't see any Trump signs. And I know that people are voting, but they don't want their house vandalized, because the Biden supporters will vandalize the Trump houses. The Trump supporters are not going to vandalize the Biden houses, and that's the problem. And I understand that. I mean, I get it. And people don't want their property or their homes or their cars, vandalized, and that's where we are. So it's really time. I mean, I know that this is an organization where everybody votes and they encourage their children to vote. I mean, I know I grew up, and the two things that were never acceptable in my house were bouncing a check, shows how old I am, and not voting.
Yeah.
I mean, my parents, when I was in college, were like, you don't vote, you can pay your own tuition.
Yeah.
But that's not the mentality of many people. So we all have to reach out to our children, our grandchildren, our neighbors, our people we go to church with, and really encourage people to vote. Because, when I was elected in 2014, there's almost 1 million people in Fresno County.
Yeah.
So even if you say that half of them or 40% of them are eligible voters, I won with 66,000 votes.
Right.
And that's crazy. That so many people don't use their power, they don't use their voice to vote. And so we really have to continue that movement of getting people out to vote, because the people in Sacramento who are elected as assemblymen and women and senators are the ones creating SB 145. Right. And all of the other legislation. I mean, I could go on and on and on about the things. 2 years ago, we had a press conference with the U.S. Attorney's Office over a collaboration that we have called Project Safe Neighborhoods, and there was one of the reporters in town who I liked very much. He's since retired, worked for Channel 30, and he said, "This looks like a bunch of Trump supporters up here, just all touting the Trump administration because he's giving you more money for this federal-state collaboration." And the U.S. attorney said, there was 4 or 5 of us elected DAs there, and Jerry Dyer spoke, and he said, would any of the elected DAs like to address this? And so I addressed it, and I don't know if you remember, but it went viral.
Yeah.
It was a literal temper tantrum that I had, and I like the reporter. He's a nice guy,
Yeah.
but I just tried to say, this isn't even red and blue. This isn't Republican. This is democracy. This is humanity. I mean, this is when they started passing laws where we ban straws and give out needles. This is where they said you can't, this was 2 years ago when they decided that we can't certify young 15 and 16-year-olds who commit crimes like murder to adult court.
Right.
And the most that they can get in a sentence for killing someone or attempting to kill someone is 2 years. And we don't even have a youth authority anymore. We don't have a home for these people. So just what I said 2 years ago has just recently happened in Fresno. Back 2 years ago, it was September 30th, they passed the law of 2018, said we can't certify these young gangbangers. And I said, the older gangbangers are going to put the guns in the hands of the kids. And sure enough, we had a 5-year-old girl shot in Fresno a couple weeks ago, 10 days ago. And the shooters have been arrested, and they're both juveniles. One is 15, and there's 3 of them actually, but 2 shooters. One's 15 and one's 16. And we can't even attempt to certify the 15-year-old shooter to adult court. Can't do it. Yeah. So you have, and thankfully that little girl survived, and it's not a murder, it's an attempted murder. But the point is that you have these gang members who are able to take advantage, and they know the law. And the sex offenders are the same thing. They're not sometimes they're not stupid people. They know they're sick, but they're not stupid, and they know. So they pick their victims very carefully, knowing how they're going to get away with it. So it's very disturbing, but we've got to start educating the public to figure out who they're voting for, because these assembly people and senators are the ones that are bringing this legislation that is driving this state into the toilet.
Yeah, I think you said two important things. One, the importance of voting, but then also talking about almost being at this tipping point, this real critical juncture in which direction are we going to go as a country
100%.
And a county even. And then, like you just said, it's really about educating voters. Even more so, I always tell people, I'm not so much about making it easier to vote because I want to make sure that people take the time to educate themselves so they can cast an informed vote. And being at that critical point here, I think really gives us as Republicans that opportunity to have those good, meaningful discussions about what our values are, what those values look like in legislative form, and how what's coming out of Sacramento almost daily is entirely counter to what we really believe. And that's not, like you say, a Republican or a Democrat issue. These are humanity issues.
100%.
You know? And I really encourage people to take the time to find out what's going on, find out what these issues are, do some research, and don't be afraid to talk to people.
Well, and the other thing I think too, we can go back to Prop 47. The ballot titles are a big deal.
Right.
Because Prop 47, which reduced heroin, methamphetamine, and cocaine to misdemeanors, and any theft crime below 950 and some identity theft things, and just reduced a laundry list of crimes to misdemeanors. That ballot title was called Safe Schools and Neighborhoods.
Right.
And I don't know how many dollars have gone to other counties, but I will tell you not $1 has come here to Fresno based on for safe schools and neighborhoods because of the savings, because that was how they touted it, that it was going to be causing all of this savings, and it was going to be all these poor drug addicts and poor drug abusers. Well, everything that Prop 47 purported to do, we already had those availability. And I think I spoke at Republican Women about this exact subject, why I wasn't a fan of Prop 47. And sure enough, it's one of those situations where you hate to be right, because it's proven, since 2015 that it's a disaster.
Right.
It's an absolute disaster, because look at the homeless people. Everyone wants to know, oh, we have this homeless problem. It's a terrible thing. We have an addiction problem.
Right.
We have a drug problem, because Fresno is actually doing very well in housing people that are situationally homeless, right? People lose their jobs, they have medical bills that are overwhelming, right? We have the MAP point, we have a lot of great resources, and done a lot of great things. The people who are out on the street, they want to be out on the street because they want to be in their addiction, and they want to continue to live that life. And there are many times, the Fresno PD Homeless Task Force has done amazing things over the last 10 years. And they offer people rides to the rescue mission. They offer people rides to the Poverello house. They offer them treatment. They will take them in for free. They will house their things, their pets. They don't want it. They want to stay out on the street because they are that addicted. And when you look at the freeway, when I drive to work on 41, I can't even believe that this is my hometown.
Yeah.
And the Fresno police and the Fresno sheriff, they don't have jurisdiction on the highways. We have to wait our turn for Caltrans to come, and so many people call me and say, Lisa, what can we do about this homeless situation on the freeway? Why any homeless person would want to be on the embankment of a freeway is beyond my comprehension. But they're all there, and they're dirty, they're messy, the trash is just, it's appalling and it's unhealthy for everybody. But we have to wait for Caltrans to come in, and CHP obviously doesn't have the resources, because going into those homeless encampments is hazardous to the health of whoever it is, the Caltrans worker or the officers that are going in. And so we have some really serious problems.
Yeah. It seems like, particularly with the homeless issue, we shifted a couple decades ago from addressing it through a mental health aspect with involuntary commitments and rehabilitation for drug addicts to, no, we're not going to do any of that now. Any of that has to be voluntary. And then it became criminal, putting them into the criminal system. And now, certainly in the last decade or so, we're almost eliminating the option to put them through the criminal system because we're emptying our jails and our prisons and decriminalizing offenses. And so where does that leave them? Obviously, that's exactly what you described.
In a big black hole.
Yeah.
So last night we had a discussion over the dinner table, and my son said, well, Mom, why can't you just take the homeless people to jail and then give them, like if they're trespassing or something, and then give them a bath and give them a meal, and then you can put them into a program, because obviously we have a lot of discussions about drugs and this and that at our house. And I explained to him that when you bring a homeless person in, first of all, you can't bring, it's not a crime to be homeless,
Right.
so you can't bring somebody to jail unless they've actually committed a crime, a trespass, or this or that. And even when you do, sometimes these people have open abscesses, they're sickly. Now we have COVID on top of it all. So then the jail would refer them, if they did have a crime that they could house them for, would refer them to the emergency room, right? So you either overcrowd the jails or you overcrowd the emergency room. And you can't jail people for not committing a crime. You can't jail someone for simply being addicted, right? So we have to have, and this was another, circling back to 2015, this was another problem that we all knew was going to happen with Prop 47. You can't pass a law decriminalizing drugs without having the proper resources available for rehabilitation. We were not ready. We do not have enough beds in Fresno, nor do we have enough beds in the state of California to house the people who need treatment. And there's other cities that have done sobering centers and tried to go down that route, but this is the decriminalization of drugs and the passing of the laws that say marijuana is not a big deal. Everybody should just be allowed to smoke pot. It's not as bad as alcohol, blah, blah, blah. Look around. It's not just Fresno, and it's certainly not just California. Everywhere you go that they have passed laws legalizing marijuana, which is almost all states now.
Yeah.
The crime has gone up, the homelessness has gone up, mental health issues have gone up, and unemployment is, rampant, and these people are just on the streets. So as a nation, we really have to start to think, what are we doing? Where are these freedoms taking us?
Yeah. Not
to good places.
I think one thing too, again, kind of particular to the homeless issues, whether it's mental health or drug addiction issues, is who's really best suited to address those needs. And you look at the success that a program like the Rescue Mission and the programs that they have for people who voluntarily join the program, but their success rate is really fantastic, and they really see some incredible life changes coming for these people who avail themselves of these services. And one thing I see in that personally is that ability for them to bring the spiritual side to the table, because what these people need is a change of heart.
Absolutely.
And government is able to give a shelter, but they're not equipped nor intended to really meet people where they are, deal with their issues, and really reach into the soul issues, the soul care that's really needed to bring these people,
which is where addiction,
to that point of voluntary,
which is where addiction is oftentimes born, is in the emotional well-being of a person. Because no person who uses drugs, who smokes a joint or does a line of cocaine or potentially even injects heroin or methamphetamine for the first time says, hey, I just hope this leads to me being homeless and me losing my job and my family and everything else. People don't start off for that reason. They don't start, but people have different reactions to this, and nobody starts out wanting to be an addict. But the absence of faith, the absence of God, the absence of religion, the absence of a higher power, right? Because anybody who's been through AA or NA or had a family member go through, you don't have to believe in God. You just have to believe in something greater than yourself in order to participate in a 12-step program. And I think the absence of that in the family and the breakdown of the family is really just something that's gripping us nationwide.
Yeah.
Nationwide.
I think additionally, none of those people, before they engage in that activity for the first time, thinks to themselves, my life is so fantastic right now. Things are going so well. I'm so happy. This is going to make it even better.
Right.
It usually comes from that place of despair or loss or, looking for something to figure out how to get from where you are to happy.
Right.
And I think, too, the other thing as far as that goes for me personally, again, is I think we expect too much from government in those regards because, again, what do we think government can do in that situation to come in and actually help a person out of those types of predicaments, and that the chains of addiction and mental illness, if we're looking for people to voluntarily recognize those things and come to government to help them out of it, I think we've lost the game before we ever set foot on the field.
Well, I think that's very true, because what a lot of people don't realize, I think, is that the addiction of a human being can come in so many forms. It can come from an accident where Vicodin is given. It can come from children getting their wisdom teeth out and be given, Vicodin. And the faith-based rehabilitation centers are often the ones that are the most successful. And it takes more than just government or judicial intervention to help people get clean. There's a lot of people that ask me all the time, Lisa, how do you know if someone's an alcoholic? How do you know if someone is an addict? And from the training and the education that I've had, both personally and professionally, it's sort of a series of questions. Does the alcohol or drug addiction interfere with familial relationships? Does it affect friendships? Do you stop getting invited places because you're always the obnoxious drunk, or your husband is always the one who makes a fool out of himself or offends someone? Have you lost your job? Have you had a ticket? Have you had a DUI? Are you abusing? Are you seeking out drugs from your grandma, from your aunt, from your neighbor? Those are signs that there is addiction, because it goes, on the scale of use, abuse, and addiction, right? And so a lot of people who are very fortunate stop when they start realizing, hey, I'm abusing this substance. And before they get into the addiction, they can reverse it. But once you are in the addiction mode, it is very difficult to come out. And the government intervention that you talk about is often police, judicial, right? And then government funded programs, or finding that you don't have the means to take care of it through insurance or familial support. That's usually the last stop. And we do need to rely more on our families. There's many private companies and even law enforcement agencies. The California Bar, I know, has a substance abuse opportunity for members of the bar. If you feel that you're having some sort of issue, you can reach out for counseling. The County of Fresno has an opportunity for any type of counseling for all county employees. And you hope that people take advantage of those things, because the whole point is to not get them to the point where the government is then responsible. Because when other people, whether it's the church, whether it's the family, when nobody else is taking responsibility, that's where it ends up. And it's overwhelming. It's unmanageable.
Seg one more time
Sure.
into just kind of law enforcement in general, and obviously, and so unfortunately, we see so much unrest across the country. And most recently, just in the last few days, we had an ambush down in LA where two officers, uniformed officers, sitting in their car, their police car, were shot. Apparently reports at the moment are that surgeries have been successful, they're likely to survive,
Yes.
So praise the Lord for that. But it again just shows the critical point we're at in this country as far as respect for law enforcement is concerned, and the vital role that most of us still realize they play in our lives. And we want safe communities, and yet we see talks of defunding the police and again decriminalizing so many things and almost tying the hands of all levels of law enforcement. So where do you see us in Fresno County, in the state of California, and again across the country as far as the civil unrest and unfortunately the war on cops seems to be?
So it's one of the most difficult things that we deal with right now today, is the fact that anybody that goes out there wearing a uniform can be subject to an ambush like this. Even our DA investigators, who don't necessarily wear a uniform, but they wear a badge and a gun. And it sickens me, quite honestly, that this type of behavior is allowed, that it is accepted by some people. I mean, there were BLM people outside the hospital in Los Angeles screaming, "Die pigs, die pigs," and that telling the family members, looking in the camera, saying, "I hope your loved one dies because they're pigs." So the current situation with BLM specifically, and I'll just state it for the record, about 6 or 7 years ago, my family and I had the opportunity to kind of take in a kid who was playing basketball at Fresno State, African American, and he is our son. He's part of our family, and I like to think that I don't have a racist bone in my body. But the BLM organization is a terror organization. And do I think that Black Lives Matter? Yes, they do. They matter very much to me. I have a lot of friends who are African American. I have no issues at all. But Black Lives Matter, right?
Mhm.
They do. But the term is fine,
Yeah.
but the organization is despicable. And there are so many people. I was at CVS yesterday because I ran out of flour, and so instead of standing in the line at the grocery store, I just ran into CVS real quick, and there was this very nice African American man behind me who I've seen in my neighborhood before, and he had a Black Lives Matter shirt on. And I know him. I've seen him around. I've spoken to him. We walk together. We pass each other. I know he's not an anarchist. I know
Right.
he's not a terrorist. I know he just means that Black Lives matter, that his life matters, that the life of his child matters. But the organization is completely out of control, and there are just people right now in the nation who want to be anarchists, and they are using African Americans, and they're using the racial tension to just push their evil, right? So that's despicable in and of itself. And I think the miscommunication about what Black Lives Matter is, it's such an unorganized group of people that there are the terrorists, and then there are people like professional athletes, right? We have it on the courts now at the NBA. We have it on the NFL. We have all those things. Those are not anarchists. Those are not people who want to see people die. They have a message. Do I agree with it? No. But they have a message, and they're not trying to kill people. They don't want to see cops die. That's not what they're pushing out. There's a lot of Black people that are coming out saying, no, that's not what we mean. And so I think we have to get through the presidential election. I think a lot is going to change after November. Hopefully it'll change quickly and we won't have to wait till January. If it goes the Biden way, we're going to be in trouble.
Yeah.
Because we don't have a presidential ticket on the other side that is pro-law enforcement. I have had some interactions with Kamala Harris. She used to be the district attorney of San Francisco. And I will say that I was sorely disappointed in how she behaved as attorney general. She wears that when it's convenient for her that she was a prosecutor, but she's not. She's not pro-law enforcement at all.
Right.
And she's riding whatever political wave she can to advance herself. I'm not a fan. Not that she cares,
Right.
but I'm not. And that's the type of politician, really, one that promotes their own career or their own potential advancement over what's really important to our people, to the citizens, to be fair to everybody. And she was a prosecutor, so she knows. She knows the truth of how the system goes. Is there racism in the world? 100% absolutely. Are there bad cops? 100% absolutely. But the ratio of good cops to bad cops is so far leaning toward good cops and peacemakers than it is the bad ones. And the media is a whole nother, issue, and what they put out and what they do. But circling back to Fresno, we are very blessed here in this community, and I am superstitious a little bit, so I'm gonna knock on wood. And I'll tell you, I believe, from the lens that I've had as district attorney for the last 6.5 years now, is that the reason we have peace in this community is really because of one person and one person only, and that's Jerry Dyer. Jerry started from the minute he became police chief 19 years ago to promote a relationship with the pastors in Southwest Fresno, who are a group of amazing men that I'm so proud to know, and I got to know them through Jerry. Pastor Binion and DJ Kreiner, and just all of them out there. They're just such good people because they're true to their upbringing, they're true to their culture, they're true to the people in their congregations, but they also understand that there has to be conversation, that there has to be peace, and that we are not going to win. They're not going to win, and we're not going to win in law enforcement if we fight.
Right.
And so there are so many leaders here, African American leaders, who have had rallies, right? We've had peaceful rallies, we've had peaceful demonstrations, and I think that is because we do have trust between the Fresno PD and the African American culture and the Hispanic culture and the Asian culture. We have done the work, right? Jerry led a lot of us into that direction, and there's a lot of community policing that goes on. in Fresno. There's so many captains and sergeants and beat cops. I can't tell you how many times I've gotten a call from the beat cop who's out, hey Lisa, we're gonna, there was this terrible incident at this house and there's 6 kids there, none of them have bikes, we're gonna try to kick in some money, we're trying to, and they'll raise money just on their own time, on their day off, and they'll go to Walmart and buy 6 bikes and just drop them off at the house, or you'll have a police officer who comes upon a welfare call for an elderly woman or man who has no family in the area, and they'll hook them up with Meals on Wheels and social services that they maybe didn't know they had. So that type of stuff that goes on every day in the Police Athletic League and the chaplaincy, that's the stuff that the media refuses to cover. So I think that, and the sheriff's department has their reading posse where the sheriff distributes books, and they do a lot in the rural communities to work with immigrant children and immigrant families. And that's all the stuff that nobody in the media wants to pay attention to because it doesn't sell. It's not fiery, it's not sexy, so they don't put it on. But I think that we are very blessed here in Fresno, and we have a good relationship. If there's a church that calls me, I go. I'll speak. I'll show up at the service, and we have constant. I'm in text contact with DJ Kreiner out at St. Russ Baptist Church, and if they have, I entertained some young African American boys here in my office who had gone through the juvenile system, and they had things to say about how their probation officers treated them and how they were treated at juvenile hall because they wanted to improve the system. And so I said, well, come on in and let's chat, and we did, and we had some productive conversations. And I reached out to Kirk Haynes, who's our probation chief here in Fresno, who's an amazing man and a great friend. I just respect him so much, who happens to also be African American. And we talked with him a little bit, and the boys went to see him, and he took the criticism that they had of his officers, and they tweaked some things. I mean, one thing was as simple as when one of the boys went in to check with his probation officer, he said, "Are you flunking any of your classes?" And he said, "No, I'm actually getting 3 A's and 3 B's." Right? So, just that little simple thing of a probation officer saying, "Hey, are you getting any A's?" Instead of, "Are you flunking your classes?" It mattered to those kids, right? So those are the little conversations that we have, and those are the things, we are very lucky here in Fresno. We don't have a lot of people in leadership positions that have big egos. Right? We don't have people that are simply driven by politics. You've got the sheriff goes out and talks to people and intermixes with people. I do. Jerry did for years. I know Andy has done it also too, being the police chief, and I know he's getting ready to retire, and we'll have a new police chief soon. And I hope that that's part of the hiring process, that they take into consideration, because I think that's what makes Fresno special.
Yeah.
We also have an amazing relationship with the U.S. Attorney's Office and the FBI. Here in Fresno, and you may see on TV sometimes where there's always a sort of a little bit of a competition and a conflict, because when the feds come in, all the county and state guys bow up and the feds come in and kind of take over. We don't have that here in Fresno. And we do tons of operations and tons of wiretaps and criminal investigations together and collaboratively, and we work great with HSI and FBI and DEA and the U.S. Attorney's Office. We have tremendous support, so we're very lucky. And I think that it's important that we keep that up. We just keep the conversation going. We try not to draw too many, lines in the sand where we're not going to talk about this or we're not going to talk about that. And we just keep trying to educate the community more and more about why we need to remain peaceful. Because, there's a lot of people that have differing opinions.
Yeah. And
we need to respect each other to come to some good conclusions and some productive answers to how we live now.
I want to kind of wrap up by thanking you, not just for participating in this, but I remember one of the first times I heard you speak, and it was, 6 some years ago now, and you talked about coming in as the district attorney. You'd been in the office and, ran for election and were fortunate enough to win, and the first thing you did, you said, when you came into the department as the leader of it, was to kind of gather your people, and you kind of reorganized where people were serving, you know, based on what their interests were. If someone was really passionate about animals, maybe you shifted them from homicide to, focusing on crime, animal abuse and cruelty issues, and, that type of kind of restructuring. And that always stuck with me, because I thought how impressive it was
thank you.
to really realize how the individuals affect the efficiency and productivity and morale of a department. And so I just wanted to kind of put that back out there and let you know that that was something, like I say, that really stuck with me. And I encourage other people, if you have those types of situations, follow her lead and think about those things. Happy employees make for happy customers. I've heard that on some commercials.
Yeah.
But it's very true. And so I wanted to compliment you on that.
Thank you.
And thank you for serving our county in this capacity.
Oh, it's my honor.
I know the strain and the stress and all of that comes with that type of job, but to hear your passion for the issues and genuinely your passion for the people and community here in Fresno County, I know you consider it a privilege and an honor to do that, but just know that you have our support as well. And I trust that you feel that throughout the community.
I do.
And particularly when you have things like recently coming out in support of our businesses and not criminalizing their attempt to make a living and those types of things, it just reminds us the strength of character. That, like you say, we're very fortunate in Fresno County to have that in a lot of our leaders and elected officials. And so I also want to kind of let those who have tuned in know two things very quickly. And one is that some of the legislation specifically that we addressed, I'm thinking specifically of SB 145, I encourage you to look it up yourself and research it, because it is so difficult to tell you what it is and what it's about, and still trust that we can have a family-friendly interview. And so if you didn't really understand specifically what we were talking about of any of those legislative issues, do the research, find out what it is, and feel free to ask questions of us. I would be happy to forward any questions you have to Lisa. If there's additional information you want on some of those things. I know it was a little bit vague at times on some of those issues, but they're extremely sensitive, and so I wanted to be careful in how we dealt with those and discuss them on camera. But don't hesitate to reach out with questions. We would love to answer those for you. You can message our Facebook page privately, and we can get those answers for you. Do a little bit of research on some of those things if you didn't feel like we gave you enough information. But also any other questions you have, please ask them in the comment sections of this video. Send us private messages, emails, any way you can reach out. We'd be happy to forward those to our district attorney and try and get you some additional information and answers to those questions. Like you said, I think we covered maybe 5% of the ground that we could with all of the issues that are out there. So maybe we'll be able to call on you again and kind of update things and see where things are. But just finally, again, you have our absolute support. We are so grateful for you. I think I can speak for Republican women when I say we include you in our prayers.
Thank you.
Because we know how important that is as well.
Yes.
And just thank you so much for the work you're doing and for taking the time to share with us today.
You are most welcome, and I just want to thank you very much for coming down and taking the time and inviting me to participate in this. And I want all the ladies at Republican Women to know that I always enjoy coming to your lunches. I want to give a special shout out to Martha Kistler for all the work that she put into the law enforcement appreciation walk. Martha, it was, people are still talking about it, and I know it was COVID and kind of a bad air day, but it was very much appreciated by everybody who participated. And you know, don't hesitate to write letters or send cards or drop off cookies at your local policing station, because our peace officers who are out there are risking their lives every day. And all of those things, you know, whenever a Girl Scout troop or somebody stops by with their grandchildren with cookies that they've baked and they stop off at one of the policing districts, it really matters to them, and it really makes a big difference. So Martha, thank you for everything that you did, and I want you to know I feel your prayers. I wake up every day and I feel like there's a shield around me, and I know I have people stop me in the grocery store and say I'm praying for you, and it really does matter, so I appreciate it very much.
Good. Well, again, thank you for tuning in. Stay tuned for our next luncheon interview. Thank you for joining us virtually, and we will be back. So stay tuned, and we'll bring you some more great information in the weeks and months to come.